I woke up at 2:17 inches the morning to the sound of a shovel hitting dirt. Not a dream, not the neighbors. It was coming from our backyard. I lay still for a second, listening, and then I reached across the bed. My husband's side was empty. The sheets were cold. Thank you so much for being here. Your presence keeps this channel alive. I'd love to hear from you. What city and country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments so we can build this community together. And a quick note before we begin this story, blends fictional details for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real names or places is purely coincidental. But the core message here is something I truly hope will stay with you. My name is Megan Holloway, and for 4 years I thought I was living the life I'd always wanted. A brick colonial house on Linden Street in Carborough, North Carolina, just outside Chapel Hill. A husband named Derek who managed 3 auto body shops across the triangle. A golden retriever named Biscuit who slept at the foot of our bed every night. We had a vegetable garden in the backyard, a swing on the front porch, and dinner together every evening at 6:30. Our neighbors, the Patels, told us we were the couple they wanted to be when they grew up. I used to laugh at that. Now I realize I was laughing at a lie I didn't know I was living. The cracks started about 5 months before that night. Subtle things. Derek stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. He'd come home smelling like cigarettes, which was strange because he'd quit 2 years ago. His phone buzzed constantly, and every time I glanced his direction, he'd flip it face down. He snapped at me for leaving the porch light on, for buying the wrong brand of orange juice, for breathing too loudly during a movie. I told myself it was stress. The shops were expanding. He was working long hours. Marriages go through rough patches. That's what I told myself anyway, because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to face. Then my mother called. It was September 8th, around 7 in the evening. Derek had texted that he'd be home late. A parts delivery got delayed, he said. I was on the couch with Biscuit, watching some cooking show I wasn't really paying attention to when my phone lit up with Mom's name, Patricia Holloway, 61 years old, retired middle school English teacher, the kind of woman who made banana bread for every new family on the block and never raised her voice. Not once. Not even when I totaled her Camry at 17. Megan. Honey. Her voice was barely a whisper, tight with something I'd never heard from her before. Mom? What's wrong? I need you to come to the house tonight. Right now if you can. It's important. Very important. She paused, and I heard her breathing fast, like she'd been running. But sweetheart, don't tell Derek. Please. Don't tell him I called. My stomach dropped through the floor. My mother had never asked me to keep a secret from my husband. Never. Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on? Not over the phone. Just come. I'll explain everything when you get here. And Megan, I love you. Remember that, okay? The line went dead. I drove to her house in 14 minutes. She lived alone in the house where I grew up, a yellow Cape Cod on Weaver Street, with a wraparound porch and rose bushes she'd tended for 30 years. My father had died of a heart attack when I was 19, and she'd kept everything the same, his reading chair by the window, his collection of jazz records, even his coffee mug on the shelf above the sink. The house was her whole world. When I pulled up, the front door was wide open. Every light was off. I called her name from the driveway. Nothing. I called again from the porch. Silence. I stepped inside, fumbled for the light switch, and when the overhead lamp flickered on, my knees almost gave out. The living room was destroyed, her reading lamp knocked over, shade crushed, the coffee table flipped on its side, her favorite throw blanket crumpled against the wall like someone had been dragged across it. And near the hallway, 3 small drops of blood on the hardwood floor. Her reading glasses were on the kitchen tile, one lens cracked. She never took those glasses off. Never. I dialed 911, with hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the numbers. 2 patrol cars arrived within 8 minutes. Then a detective, a woman named Carla Reeves, mid-40s, short dark hair, sharp brown eyes, no-nonsense handshake. She'd been with the Orange County Sheriff's Office for 17 years. She told me she'd do everything she could, told me to go home and try to rest. I almost laughed. I drove home. Derek's truck was in the driveway, lights off. I found him in bed, breathing deep and steady. The note I'd left on the counter, Mom called, going to check on her, sat untouched. I didn't wake him. My mother's words echoed in my skull. Don't tell Derek. I lay on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling, and sometime after 1 a.m, exhaustion pulled me under. Then I heard the shovel. I crept to the window and looked down into the backyard. The motion sensor light had kicked on, throwing a harsh white glow across the lawn. Derek was on his knees beside the big oak tree, digging. Next to him sat a dark duffel bag, bulging, heavy-looking. He was working fast, throwing dirt to the side, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. I didn't think. I grabbed my phone and recorded. 37 seconds of video. My husband, at 2 a.m, burying something in our backyard the night my mother vanished. Then I called Detective Reeves. By sunrise, the backyard was swarming with crime scene technicians. They dug up the duffel bag at 5:48 a.m. Inside was $94,000 in cash, a laptop I'd never seen before, and a Ziploc bag containing my mother's driver's license, her social security card, her house deed, and a notarized document that made my vision blur a power of attorney, supposedly signed by my mother, granting Derek Holloway full authority over her finances, her property, and her medical decisions. I stared at my mother's signature on that document and knew instantly it was wrong. My mother crossed her T's with a sharp upward flick, a habit from decades of teaching cursive to 6th graders. This signature was flat, mechanical. Someone had copied it, but they didn't know her the way I did. Detective Reeves pulled me aside. We need to talk about your husband. That was the morning my life split in two. Derek denied everything. He sat across from Detective Reeves in the interrogation room I watched through the one-way glass and said he'd been home all night. Said I must have been dreaming. Said the stress of my mother's disappearance was making me hysterical. He even smiled, that same charming smile that had made me fall in love with him 6 years ago, and said, "My wife has an overactive imagination, Detective. Ask anyone." But I had the video. 37 seconds that his lawyer, a man named Garrett Finch, who charged $500 an hour, couldn't explain away. Derek was released that afternoon. No direct evidence linking him to my mother's disappearance, Reeves said. Not yet, but the investigation was officially focused on him, and my mother was still gone. For 3 days, I barely slept. I searched Derek's home office, his truck, the pockets of every jacket in our closet. On September 11th, I found a second phone. It was taped behind the drawer of his nightstand, a cheap prepaid burner with no passcode. I opened it with shaking hands and scrolled through the messages. There were dozens of texts to a number, saved only as V. The earliest was dated 5 months back. "She's getting suspicious. We need to move faster. Don't worry, I'll handle Patricia. Just get the documents ready. When do I get my cut? After the property transfers. $200K. I promised you, didn't I?" The most recent message, sent at 9:47 p.m. on September 8th, the night my mother vanished, read, "It's done. She won't be a problem." I couldn't breathe. I drove straight to the sheriff's office and handed the phone to Reeves. She read the messages, her jaw tightening with every swipe, then looked up at me. "Do you know anyone named V?" "No, I don't know who that is." She nodded slowly. "We'll trace this number. In the meantime, Hannah." She caught herself. "Megan, your husband is dangerous. You need to stay somewhere else tonight." I didn't go somewhere else. I went back to our house, locked every door, and sat in the kitchen with Biscuit at my feet, waiting. I wasn't running. I was done running. Whatever Derek was hiding, I was going to find it before he could bury it any deeper. On September 13th, 5 days after my mother disappeared, Reeves called me at 7 a.m. We found her. My heart stopped. Is she? She's alive. Barely. She was found in a storage unit on the south side of Durham. Unit 4417, rented under a fake name 3 weeks ago, paid in cash. Someone called in an anonymous tip. She was dehydrated, hypothermic. The unit had no ventilation, no light. She'd been tied to a chair with zip ties. Paramedics said another 12 hours and she wouldn't have made it. I collapsed against the kitchen counter, sobbing so hard I couldn't stand. Biscuit pressed his head against my leg and whined. "She's at Duke University Hospital. Trauma ward. You should come now." I made it to the hospital in 20 minutes. My mother was in the ICU, hooked up to an IV drip, a heart monitor, an oxygen tube. Her face was bruised purple and yellow across her left cheekbone, and her wrists were raw and red from the zip ties. But her eyes were open. When she saw me, she tried to smile, and it broke me in half. "Mom." I grabbed her hand, careful of the IV. "I'm here. I'm right here." She squeezed my fingers weakly. "Megan, baby." She swallowed hard, wincing. He came to the house. That night, I heard the back door open, and then her eyes went blank. She blinked several times, confused. Dr. Alan Park, her attending physician, tall, early 50s, gentle voice explained what was happening. "Post-traumatic amnesia," he said. "Her brain is protecting itself from the trauma. She may remember fragments, but the full picture might take weeks to return. Or it might not come back at all." Another witness silenced by injury. Another memory stolen. But unlike the old stories where the victim stays quiet, my mother fought back before she even knew it. The morning after she was admitted, a nurse found a scrap of fabric, clutched in my mother's fist, torn from her attacker's jacket, dark green canvas, with a distinctive orange thread in the weave. She'd been holding it so tightly it had left impressions in her palm. She must have ripped it during the struggle and held on through 5 days of captivity without even knowing she had it. Reeves ran the fabric through forensics. The jacket was a limited edition work coat sold exclusively through a regional chain called Blue Ridge Supply, with only 43 units sold in the Triangle area in the past year. Within 48 hours, she had a purchase record. One coat, size large, bought with a debit card belonging to a man named Victor Sims. Victor. V. Victor Sims was 34 years old, 6'1", with a record of fraud convictions in Virginia and a gambling addiction that had cost him everything. He'd been living in a rented room in Durham, working odd jobs, and according to the text messages on Derek's burner phone, he'd been my husband's partner in crime for 5 months. Reeves arrested Victor at a gas station off I-40 on September 15th. He tried to run, didn't get far. In the interrogation room, he folded within an hour. "Derek came to me in April," Victor said, his leg bouncing under the table. "I was behind on rent, owed $12,000 to a guy in Raleigh who doesn't take no for an answer. Derek said he had a way for both of us to make money. A lot of money. He said his mother-in-law had property worth $680,000, the house, retirement savings, a life insurance policy. He said if Patricia was out of the picture, his wife would inherit everything, and as her husband, he'd control the assets. All I had to do was grab the old lady, keep her somewhere quiet for a while, and Derek would handle the paperwork, forge a power of attorney, transfer the property into his name, drain the accounts. He offered me $200,000 when it was done." Victor wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I didn't want to hurt her. I swear. She was supposed to be sedated the whole time. But when I got to her house, she fought back. Hard. She scratched my face, ripped my jacket. I panicked. I hit her. Just once. I didn't mean to," he broke off. "And the storage unit? Derek picked it. Rented it himself under a fake name. Told me to keep her there until the paperwork cleared. He said it would take a week, maybe 2. But then the cops started coming around, and Derek stopped answering my calls. I realized he was going to let her die in there and blame everything on me if it went south. That's when I made the anonymous tip. I couldn't let her die. I'm not a murderer." Victor's testimony blew the case wide open, but there was one more thing he said that made the room tilt sideways. "There's something else you should know," Victor told Reeves, his voice dropping. "Derek has a daughter, a little girl. She's about 2 years old. Her mother's name is Shayla Price. She lives in Greensboro." I felt like the floor disappeared. A daughter. Derek had a daughter. Reeves found Shayla Price the next day. She was 26, worked as a receptionist at a chiropractic office, and she confirmed everything. She and Derek had been seeing each other for over 3 years since before we were married. He'd been paying her $1,500 a month in cash to keep quiet. She'd given birth to a daughter named Lily in July of last year, and Derek visited twice a month, always on days he told me he was checking on the Raleigh shop. But Shayla was scared. She told Reeves that Derek had been pressuring her for months to sign over temporary custody of Lily to him. He said he wanted to introduce Lily to me, that he was going to come clean about everything. But after my mother's disappearance hit the news, Shayla panicked. She showed up at my door on September 17th, holding a car seat with a sleeping toddler inside. "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this anymore. He told me he was leaving you. He told me we'd be together, but he's a liar and I think he's dangerous. I have to go stay with my sister in Florida. But Lily, she deserves better than running. She deserves stability. And you're her stepmother whether you knew it or not." I looked down at the little girl in the car seat. Dark curly hair, long eyelashes resting against chubby cheeks. She was wearing a yellow sundress with tiny daisies on it, and she was holding a stuffed elephant so tightly it was squished flat against her chest. Before I could say anything, Shayla handed me a diaper bag, a folder of medical records, and a letter she'd written at 3 a.m. explaining everything she knew about Derek's finances, his lies, his temper. Then she got in her car and drove away. I stood on my porch, holding a diaper bag and staring at a child I hadn't known existed 12 hours ago. Over the next 2 weeks, life became a blur of bottle warmings, diaper changes, and meetings with Detective Reeves. Derek was arrested on September 20th at a motel outside Fayetteville, where he'd been hiding since Reeves issued the warrant. They charged him with kidnapping, aggravated assault, forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. His bail hearing was a circus. Garrett Finch argued that Derek was a devoted husband and business owner with no prior record. The judge set bail at $300,000. Derek posted 10% through a bondsman and walked out that afternoon. I filed for a restraining order the same day. The judge granted it. Derek was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or the hospital. But restraining orders are just paper. On October 4th, I was giving Lily a bath. She'd started calling me Meggie by then, which made my chest ache in the sweetest way when I heard glass shatter downstairs. Biscuit started barking wildly. Then Derek's voice, slurred and furious, echoed through the house. "Megan, we need to talk. Open this door right now." I grabbed Lily, wrapped her in a towel, and locked us in the upstairs bathroom. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial 911. Through the door, I heard him stomping up the stairs, cursing, slamming his fist against the wall. "You took my daughter. You took my money. You ruined my life." He was screaming now. "I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix everything." He tried the bathroom door, locked. He slammed his shoulder against it once, twice. On the third hit, the frame cracked. But that was when the sirens reached our street. Blue and red lights filled the bathroom window. I heard officers shouting, boots on the staircase, and then silence. They'd tackled him in the hallway, 6 feet from us. Lily was crying against my chest, and I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered, but we were alive. This time, there was no bail. The judge revoked it immediately. Assault, breaking and entering, violation of a restraining order, endangering a minor. Derek was held without bond at the Orange County Detention Center. And then my mother remembered. It was October 19th. She'd been home from the hospital for a week, staying in my guest room because I refused to let her live alone. She was sitting at the kitchen table, watching Lily stack blocks on the floor, when she suddenly went still. "Megan." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were distant. I remember now. She told me everything. How Derek had come to her house on September 7th, the day before she called me, and demanded she sign over power of attorney. How he'd shown her bank statements proving he owed $220,000 failed investments in a car wash franchise that had gone bankrupt. How he'd told her that if she didn't cooperate, he'd take me for everything in the divorce and make sure I never saw a penny of her estate. My mother had refused. She'd told him to get out of her house and never come back. She told him she was going to call me that night and tell me everything. And then, my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper, he looked at me with the coldest eyes I've ever seen and said, "You should have just signed, Patricia." The next evening, Victor Sims broke into her house. That testimony, combined with Victor's cooperation, the burner phone messages, the forged power of attorney, the buried duffel bag, and my 37-second video, created a case that even Garrett Finch couldn't dismantle. But the final piece came from somewhere I never expected. In late November, while reviewing Derek's financial records, Reeves discovered a series of wire transfers totaling $48,000 to an account in Shayla Price's name, but Shayla told investigators she'd only ever received cash from Derek. Someone else had been accessing the account. Forensic accountants traced the transactions back to a shell company Derek had created, funneling money through Shayla's name, without her knowledge, to hide assets from me and from creditors. Among those records was a life insurance policy on my mother, $250,000, taken out 18 months earlier, listing Derek as the sole beneficiary. My mother had never signed it. The signature was forged, just like the power of attorney. He wasn't just trying to steal her property. He was planning to kill her and collect insurance money on top of it. This had been in motion for over a year. The trial began in March of the following year. I sat behind the prosecution table every single day for 2 weeks, Lily at daycare, my mother in the gallery beside me. I testified about the shovel, the duffel bag, the burner phone. Victor Sims testified in an orange jumpsuit, tears running down his face, about how Derek had recruited him and then abandoned him. My mother took the stand and, in a steady voice that made me prouder than I've ever been, recounted the night Derek threatened her and the 5 days she spent tied to a chair in the dark. The forensic document examiner showed the jury magnified comparisons of my mother's real signature and the forgeries, the missing flick on the T, the mechanical pressure, the tremor that comes from copying rather than writing naturally. The financial analyst walked through $220,000 in hidden debt, $48,000 in laundered funds, and a $250,000 insurance policy on a woman Derek had tried to have killed. Garrett Finch argued that Victor was the real mastermind, that Derek was a desperate man who'd made bad decisions but never intended physical harm. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 6 hours and came back with guilty verdicts on every count: kidnapping, aggravated assault, forgery, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, endangering a minor. The judge sentenced Derek to 42 years. He would not be eligible for parole until he was 73. When the gavel came down, I looked at my mother. She was crying silently, her hand over her mouth. I reached across and took her other hand, and we sat there together in that courtroom, holding on to each other the way we'd been holding on for months, fiercely, desperately, and with a love that no forged document could ever replicate. I adopted Lily officially the following June. The hearing lasted 40 minutes. The judge, a kind woman in her 50s named Margaret Chen, asked me why I wanted to raise a child who wasn't mine by blood. I said, because she is mine. She's been mine since the night Shayla put her in my arms and trusted me to give her what her father never could: safety, honesty, and love. Blood doesn't make a family. Showing up does. And I will show up for this little girl every single day for the rest of my life. Lily was in the courtroom that day. She was 2.5, wearing a pink dress my mother had picked out, clutching her stuffed elephant. When the judge said the word approved, Lily looked up at me and said, "Meggie, we go home now?" "Yes, baby." I picked her up and held her tight. "We're going home." My mother moved in with us permanently that fall. She took over the garden, planted tomatoes and sunflowers, and read to Lily every night before bed. Biscuit appointed himself Lily's personal guardian, sleeping outside her bedroom door without fail. And slowly, carefully, the 3 of us 4, counting Biscuit, built a life that felt real in a way my marriage never had. One evening in October, a full year after the night Derek broke into our house, I was sitting on the porch watching Lily chase fireflies in the yard. My mother came out with 2 cups of tea and sat beside me. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she said. "What?" That night in the storage unit. It was so dark I couldn't see my own hands. I couldn't feel my fingers. I thought I was going to die in there, and all I could think about was you. Whether you were safe, whether you'd know what happened to me. She took a sip of her tea. "But you found me. You didn't stop until you found me." I leaned my head on her shoulder. "You called me that night because you were trying to protect me. You tried to warn me about Derek. And you listened." She smiled. "That's the thing about us Holloway women. We listen to each other, even when the world is falling apart." Lily came running up the steps, a firefly cupped carefully in her tiny hands. "Look, Meggie! Look, Grandma! It's glowing." My mother leaned down and peered into Lily's hands, gasping with exaggerated wonder. "Oh my goodness, that's the most beautiful firefly I've ever seen." Lily beamed, then carefully opened her hands and let it go. We watched it blink its way across the yard and disappear into the trees. If this story taught me anything, it's this. Pay attention to the people you trust with your life. Sometimes the person sleeping next to you is the one planning to take everything you have. Don't ignore the whispers in your gut. Don't make excuses for cruelty dressed up as stress. And if someone you love calls you in the middle of the night, sounding afraid, go. Don't wait. Don't ask questions. Just go. I used to think betrayal was something that happened to other people, in other marriages, in other towns. I know better now. But I also know that love, real love, the kind that shows up at 2 in the morning and never stops fighting, is stronger than any lie. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment below. Have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be hiding a terrible secret? I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. And a gentle reminder, the stories on this channel contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If you prefer different content, feel free to explore other videos that suit your interests. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and God bless.